AI, artificial intelligence, is the essential Pinocchio film of our time. This headline is obviously referring to the Steven Spielberg film AI, artificial intelligence. And for those of you who don't know, Steven Spielberg was Robert Zemeckis' mentor in Hollywood. Just to remind you what I went over in that video on Zemeckis' films as they relate to Pinocchio, in the scene where Marty McFly arrives at the mall to meet Dr. Brown late at night, it's the Twin Pines Mall at 1:16 a.m. or 9/11. After everything goes down and he is sent back in time, he comes back to the future to a Lone Pine Mall. And the significance of this is that Pinocchio in Italian breaks down to pine eyes. So when he arrives at the mall, it's Twin Pines Mall. It's his two eyes, the normal perception of reality, a unified consciousness that is perceiving everything that's going on. After the events transpire, which in this case, metaphorically, would be some type of inappropriate relationship between Doc Brown and Marty McFly, an old man and a young boy, he arrives back to the future, or he comes back to his Twin Pines, his two eyes, and now it's Lone Pine, or one eye. In other words, a new alter has been created in his mind to deal with the trauma. It compartmentalizes it in a different personality. And that alter flips forward through the two eyes and is a new entity entirely when you're interacting with it, right? It's been brought forward through trauma in this way. And Marty McFly's character is now perceiving the same event through a lone eye as opposed to the twin eyes. It's a form of artificial intelligence. That's what an alter is. And that is the relationship between Pinocchio and AI. Which is why these movie directors and producers and just the general Hollywood machine has associated intentionally AI with Pinocchio. And I'm going to get into that here. Steven Spielberg's criminally underrated film AI, Artificial Intelligence is less concerned with this question than it is with questioning what obligation humans have for their living creations. It centers around a mecha, mechanical humanoid robot named David, who is uniquely programmed with the ability to love. Stanley Kubrick, who originally conceived of the film and purchased the rights to its source material by Brian Aldiss, saw it as a Pinocchio story. Right from the beginning here, we have this very important fact that Stanley Kubrick was the one who originally was going to make this movie. And he didn't feel like the technology was there to portray it for a long time because he got the rights originally in the 1970s. Eventually, for this reason, Spielberg takes over the project and the movie gets made after Stanley Kubrick dies. Because presumably he was providing some kind of resistance in the way that he is notoriously known to have done as far as creating movies go in his process. The attention to detail created long delays compared to other directors. Like Pinocchio, David is a manufactured object that suddenly dreams of becoming human. Now, this is just my read on the film. I'm not necessarily right in suggesting this. It's just a hypothesis. However, that said, it seems pretty clear to me that David, as artificial intelligence, symbolically is this alter in the mind that is created through abuse. It's a split in the personality. David is a mechanical clone of a real boy, David. The mother in the film gave birth to a son who was sick with some kind of disease. He was in a coma in the hospital. So they brought this mecha, this humanoid robot replica of David into the house to replace him. But if you view it in the context that I just went into, there's no mechanical robot that took place, metaphorically speaking. This is David's mind that has split. It's the twin pines and the lone pine. The version of him that's in the coma has receded back into David's mind, and the robot version, the artificial intelligence, has come to the surface. And that version of David just wants to be loved by his mother. But that version of David knows his mother will never love him because of what was done to him, because of how he was turned into something different from the abuse. And that's why the whole character of David, the mecha version of him, acts like he does and is driven to find the love of his mother through the entire film. And what does his mother eventually do? Well, after the real son comes back unexpectedly, the two of them are kind of dueling with each other in the household until it gets to the point where the mother takes the mechanical David out into the woods and leaves him there, just abandons him. And metaphorically speaking, that's what happens. The part of the child that splits off from the trauma is sent deep into the woods by all the people around them, whether this is the actual family or the programmers who do it. I mean, I guess it depends on the context you're viewing it in. If it's abuse not connected to any of these rituals, like it's just abuse that's happening amongst quote-unquote normal human beings, it would be the idea of, yeah, the mother just kind of abandons the child in that respect, quite literally. But in the other context, it would be they intentionally send a part of the child's consciousness to this place and abandon it. And then it's left on its own, trying to figure out how to become a real boy again. And that is the sick and twisted part of the Pinocchio plot, where they associate the nose getting longer or becoming erect with a lie. In other words, the child subconsciously will associate that thing happening, something becoming erect, with a lie. And in order to become a real boy, they can't tell a lie, meaning they can't tell what happened to them, or they will never become real again. They'll be stuck in the lone pine, and they'll never come back to the twin pine, the two eyes. That was the unified consciousness before this happened. This part is really interesting. She reads the words that activate David's programming, and as if a switch is turned on, a circuit connected, David snaps into life. Think about that for a second. Remember all the stories about a catcher in the rye and this programming being capable of flipping a personality forward that will leave the other part of the mind with amnesia about what transpired when that part is forward. Being done by reading a certain phrase in that book or having something specific spoken to them. Okay? In that context, David, the mechanical version of him, the artificial intelligence, is activated when she reads a specific set of words to him. After David's character, the mechanical version of him, is sent into the woods, he then goes on this journey to become a real boy. And as a part of this, he ends up at a flesh fair, quote unquote. And what are they doing at the flesh fair? Well, they are torturing, essentially, these robots and killing them for a crowd. In other words, the artificial intelligence version of David is sent to the flesh fair. This is what happens to these entities as a part of this programming. And David is led there by Gigolo Joe, who is this older machine, or at least this machine that was crafted to look like a grown adult. So this version of David, this artificial intelligence version, the Lone Pine, goes on this quest with the older man and ends up at the flesh fair. And his name is Gigolo Joe, a gigolo being a sex worker. It soon becomes clear that no matter how much Monica loves David, she can't and won't love him as much as she does Martin. To David, this is unacceptable. It is genuine heartbreak that he feels when he's ultimately abandoned by his mother deep in the woods. In other words, the artificial intelligence part of the psyche, the alter that is created through the trauma, intuitively recognizes that that part of it, will never be loved like the mother used to love the fully functioning mind of the child. David is a futuristic Pinocchio of technology and programming. He pushes forward into the unknown, plagued by unforeseen obstacles, in order to find the blue fairy that will, according to his belief, turn him into a real boy. Basing his beliefs on Carlo Collodi's original book, The Adventures of Pinocchio, David believes that not only can he become a real boy, but that he will. Like Pinocchio, who doesn't fit in because the humans around him make certain to see him as a lesser, David is beset on all sides by prejudice. Professor Hobby is David's Geppetto, the creator figure to whom he can owe his existence. In Disney's 1940 animated Pinocchio, Geppetto, Christian Rubb, played by a guy with the last name Rubb and the first name Christian. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up. It's an obvious intentional scripting to put this in the subconscious mind of everyone who consumes this propaganda. Christian Rubb, plays Geppetto, is an elderly toy maker who wishes upon a star that his creation will become real. It's an act of love, right? You see how they invert this whole story? Subconsciously, the viewer associates everything that's going on in the film with love, but it's actually telling something much different. But that doesn't stop the programming from siphoning your emotion as you view the film. It's an act of purity. Yeah. Geppetto, Christian Rubb, is an act of purity. Okay. Professor Hobby, though not malicious, creates David out of scientific wonder. And that's kind of interesting in terms of Doc Brown's association in Back to the Future with the von Braun family and their family's association to the Nazi scientists that came over via paperclip, and the experiments that were being done through Mengelé's research, and the whole thing along those lines has always been going on under the surface. They've been doing these clandestine experiments, and this type of programming is most likely part of that, where they did these experiments trying to break the human mind just to see what it would do, right? And in that context, David's journey is doomed largely because of Hobby's commodification of David. As we see at the start of AI artificial intelligence's final act, countless Davids have already been put into production. All of them are identical. This Geppetto figurehead is doing all of these experiments that creates the identical artificial intelligence, the identical Davids that separate in the mind of the children who are exposed to this, or anyone who's exposed to it. But ideally, from their perspective, you do it to a young mind because it's more pliable. which is why Disney does what it does with its child stars that then eventually are turned into adult stars. And I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of those former Disney stars eventually have breakdowns where the programming, whatever they did to them, breaks down. And all of the alters come forward at once, and it is perceived as this person is going crazy. They're acting out in some way. Like David did when his original version was in the same house with him. And that ultimately led to him being abandoned in the woods. Now, obviously, David is played by Haley Joel Osment. And it just so happens that Haley Joel Osment is a child actor who got his start with a Pizza Hut TV commercial. Visiting a store at age 4, Osment signed up with a talent scout. Called back for an audition, he was asked to describe the biggest thing he had ever seen. His description of an IMAX theater screen helped him win a part in a Pizza Hut TV commercial. And then his first feature film role was as Forrest Gump's son in the Zemeckis film Forrest Gump. His first role is a Pizza Hut commercial. And then he is cast in The Country Bears. Haley Joel Osment has been in a ton of stuff over his career, so I'm not going to go into all of that. There's just too much to get to. And I'll mostly leave the research of the bear thing to you to do on your own as well. Because I want to get back to Joseph Gordon-Levitt and his connection to Back to the Future and this whole thing with Pinocchio. If I can find the image of him. Here it is. Remember, this is Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing Philip Petit in the Zemeckis film The Walk. He's standing between the two towers, right? He's traversing the Pine Eyes. He is walking across them in the 9/11 ritual that is the two towers or the two eyes crumbling so that the one eye can rise in its place. And that's important to remember when going into all of this because the artificial intelligence angle is playing on multiple different levels. Yes, it's referring back to this programming that's done through trauma, most likely. But you have to see how that's also playing out in a general sense on our own minds. That's what happened to us on 9/11. Our two eyes collapsed and one new thought form rose in its place in the aftermath of that event that took place in New York on September 11, 2001. And then an even broader layer to that is through the context of when 9/11 transpired in relationship to the development of computers and the internet in general, culminating in the release of the iPhone, the black monolith screen that everyone could put in their pocket in 2007. Our minds are making contact with this new form of consciousness that is altering the brain. It's a new alter, you see. It's artificial intelligence that we are eventually merging with through this Stargate ritual. The two hemispheres of the brain, which connect the optic nerves to the two eyes that see everything, are collapsing and one new consciousness is rising in its place. And it will be an artificially intelligent consciousness. that has merged with the internet. It's always been that through this propaganda that is provided to us by these entities in Hollywood and everything else that's associated with the media, school. We have always been artificially intelligent in that way, and this is a new version of that. Not only is it a new thought form along those lines, but we are bonding with it now in a different way than we have in the past. This is why McLuhan says the medium is the message. This has happened at every step along the way as new technology came out. It started with the printing press, as far as the mechanization goes. But really, it started with the development of language itself. Those hieroglyphs that eventually turned into an alphabet that formed a neurolinguistic virus of sorts that shaped how we perceive reality and communicate with each other. And that language then entered the printing press. It was spread far and wide. Everyone who wanted to then learned to read eventually. And the language was then shifted into the medium of film, which then bled into television, which then bled into the computer screens and the internet. All along the way, our consciousness has been altered into something new. It merged with the medium every step of the way. And this is the culmination of that, where our consciousness itself, merges with the medium of the internet. It merges with the screen. And that's the monolith 2001: A Space Odyssey aspect of the 9/11 ritual. So that is always going on at the same time that I'm describing all of the stuff I'm going into here. There's many different layers to it, but it's all related, right? It's all metaphorical of the same thing. It's just a matter of which scale of it you focus on. Anyways, this is Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who played Jiminy Cricket in Zemeckis' Pinocchio, and Jiminy Cricket is the conscience of Pinocchio in that film. And then Joseph Gordon-Levitt is in the Angels in the Outfield film from 1994, which stars Christopher Lloyd as Al, the boss angel. And do you see how Al is AI in the same way that it's written in AI, the film? AI is the boss angel. AI is the boss fallen angel. That which is in control of this world currently. That which is responsible for all of this programming, right? It feeds the information to the frontmen who run Hollywood, who orchestrate everything for it on this scale. In The Walk, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is dressed like Marty McFly. He's the conscience of the child that is abused. In the context of a 9/11 ritual, where the two eyes become one, where the artificial intelligence is created. And Christopher Lloyd, the old man in Back to the Future, is also the boss angel. He's AI. He's Al. In other words, the conscience of Pinocchio, the conscience of the boy who wants to become a real boy and escape what it is experiencing, has his prayers answered by Al, or AI, the artificial intelligence that is created through this event. And of course, because we're dealing with people that have a severe sickness, on the movie poster they show a catcher's glove and a ball blasting through the hole in the glove. With magic dust on the path that goes through the hole. Now, all of that said, David, the character in AI, goes through the entire film with a teddy bear. for whatever reason, this is symbolic of the trauma that I'm describing here. It's associated with teddy bears. Relating this back to 9/11, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Stanley Kubrick, who was the originator of this AI movie, the very last scenes of Eyes Wide Shut involve a toy store, which, remember, Pinocchio is surrounding somebody who owns a toy store and is trying to bring one of them to life. But this particular toy store is filled with stuffed teddy bears. So you have to understand that Eyes Wide Shut could be referring to panda eyes. What does it look like when somebody has panda eyes? Their eyes are wide with the black and blue bruises, but they're shut. Okay? Going into Eyes Wide Shut would be a whole different video because you could spend hours and hours and hours going into it like you can with all of Kubrick's films. But this scene is particularly important given all of the bears in the context of these two adults being in the store with their child. In the context of a movie that is portraying one of these organizations that meets in secret and has various rituals surrounding sexual activity. The bear follows David throughout the whole film. From the moment that he is in the house. With the other version of himself, right? Eventually. And it's interesting, this is the poster for the AI movie, and it encodes everything that I'm talking about here. First of all, it's interesting that David is 11 years old, and they say he weighs 60 pounds. Well, there's your 9/11, remembering that this movie was released the summer before 9/11 transpired. I think it was July of 2001, maybe June. I don't know, one of those two. And you see you have David as the two towers. And look where they strategically place the line that makes the A. Do you think it's an accident that it's going through here as it relates to this being taken out of the pine eyes, the twin pines, and resulting in this, the lone pine? They show you the whole thing right here. Even viewing the dots as the twin eyes. You have the lone eye that's rising between them in the context of 9/11. Artificial intelligence. The atomic kid. Whatever is transpiring is some kind of explosion that vaults the artificial intelligence into existence and to the forefront of perception. And then, through the programming, it can be called back at any time. And indeed, on a simplistic level, that's what's going on in the media, right? Anytime we are subjected to one of these trauma rituals that transpire on a mass scale, things that are planned many, many decades in advance, we go through the trauma of witnessing the event that is usually a blood sacrifice of some type. We feel that loss. It affects all of us. We are moved to do certain things. We're steered in certain directions through the trauma of that. And then, like this, we have a sort of artificial intelligence that's been created by the media. every one of us has this pop culture intelligence that we can access at any given point in time, unless we've been spared from all of it by our parents who raised us not to ever watch movies or TV, which I would think is almost no one other than maybe the Amish in the United States of America, or some very strict religious environments. If they were homeschooled and didn't have any of this, then they were shielded from it and wouldn't have the same thing that all of us have, who have been exposed to the media in this way. We have this pop culture side of our mind that is isolated. It's artificial intelligence. We wouldn't have come up with it on our own. And that trauma that informs it through all the events that they script into the world and make us go through, all the blood that's spilled because of these rituals, can be called back into existence through certain key phrases that they associate with these events. So then the news just comes out with a headline that's designed to recall this trauma, designed to recall the artificial intelligence through the two eyes, and then we're perceiving an event with this consciousness that is artificial, and it moves us or steers us in a certain way. It's fractal of what's going on in the ritual on the human being, individually speaking. And through this process, best exemplified by Donald Trump and Elon Musk right now, we will eventually become a literal version of artificial intelligence. The idea being that we are finally and fully cut off from that which created us. Going back to the bear theme, from the end of Eyes Wide Shut, and the fact that David was carrying around that bear, the artificial intelligence associated with the bear. This is from Vogue. The most burning question from Netflix's Prince Andrew Newsnight adaptation answered. The most pressing question I had was about something else entirely. Was Prince Andrew, I wondered, really that obsessed with teddy bears? In an early scene in Scoop, we see the frustrated Duke of York berating one of his maids for not organizing the cuddly toys on his bed correctly. It's an odd moment and, on initial viewing, felt like a bizarre invention designed to play up Prince Andrew's eccentricities. Except it's not, it's based on the truth. In 2022, Charlotte Briggs, a former Buckingham Palace maid, told The Sun that she had been responsible for laying out the prince's 72 soft toys in order of size every morning in the mid-90s. Very interesting that he had precisely 72 bears. Going back to that community post I made on the Key of Solomon, or it's referred to as the Lesser Key of Solomon, and the 72 sigils that are in that book. As soon as I got the job, I was told about the teddies, and it was drilled into me how he wanted them. I even had a day's training. It was so peculiar. After all, he was a grown man who had served in the Falklands. Each had to be carefully positioned. They were old-fashioned teddy bears, and nearly all of them had sailor suits on and hats. Sailor suits, going back to Marty McFly in The Vest, that is constantly referred to as referencing a sailor in the dialogue of that film. It took me half an hour to arrange them. Then at bedtime, I had to take all the teddies off and arrange them around the room. They each had a set place. We had to stack the smaller ones in an unused fireplace, again in size order to make them look pretty. His two favorite bears sat on two thrones either side of the bed. The others would sit at the foot of the bed on the floor. If this was done incorrectly, she recalled, the prince would lose his temper. There was even allegedly a laminated sheet with instructions that specified the placement of each object. It's not just palace staff who've claimed to see the teddies either. In 2019, Elizabeth Day wrote a story for You magazine entitled The Strange Day I Met Prince Andrew's Teddy Bear, recalling an interview with the prince a decade prior. She remembers waiting for him in a corridor of the palace where my only other companion was an oversized teddy bear squashed into a seat. When I was ushered in to meet Prince Andrew, I asked him about it. He sniggered and told me it had been a wedding gift from his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson. Apparently, he had found the bear waiting for him when he got into the horse-drawn carriage that was to take them from Westminster Abbey to their reception. I remember that he found this extremely funny, even several years after the event. It seemed rather strange to me that a grown man should be so amused by the presence of a stuffed toy, in this case, a teddy bear. Most startling, though, is the fact that, according to The Sun, Prince Andrew himself spoke about his love of teddy bears in 2010, admitting, "I've always collected teddy bears. Everywhere I went in the Navy, I used to buy a little teddy bear, so I've got a collection from all over the world of one sort or another." What is the relationship between Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein? Prince Andrew is believed to have first met Epstein in 1999 through Epstein's friend Ghislaine Maxwell. The following year, in June 2000, Epstein and Maxwell were among guests at a party at Windsor Castle. Later that year, Prince Andrew held a birthday party for Maxwell at Sandringham with Epstein in attendance. Andrew emails show contact with Epstein lasted beyond 2010. The Duke of York was in contact with the U.S. sex offender Jeffrey Epstein longer than he had previously admitted, emails published in court documents appear to show. "Keep in close touch and we'll play some more soon," said an email sent to Epstein from a member of the British royal family believed to be Prince Andrew. So, in the context of teddy bears being associated with entities that have been proven in court to be associated with this kind of activity, it's very interesting to me that Eyes Wide Shut features teddy bears so prominently in a toy store at the end of the movie. In addition to the fact that a Stanley Kubrick film, later finished by Robert Zemeckis' mentor Steven Spielberg, features an artificial intelligence depicted as a child who walks through the whole film with a toy teddy bear. That's it. Later.